The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. When he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. It must be understood that neither by word nor by deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was that of the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on the connoisseurship of wine. Few Italians have this true virtuoso spirit. In this respect, I do not differ from him materially. I was skilful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening, during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting, party-strip dress. His head was surmounted by a conical cap with bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkable you look today! But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" he said. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! In the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. Amontillado? I have my doubts. Amontillado! I must satisfy them. Amontillado. As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchese? Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. Yet some fools have it, I said, that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go, he said. Whither? To your vaults. No, my friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese will... No, 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 I have no engagements. Come. My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is nothing. Amontillado, you have been opposed upon. And as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a cloak closely about my person. I suffered him to hurry to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I told them not to return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I knew well, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took 2 flaming torches, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults, passed along a long, winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length at the foot of the descent, and together we stood on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," he said. "It is farther on. But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls. He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orms that distilled with total intoxication. Nitre? He asked at length. Nitre, I replied. How long have you had your cough? My poor friend found it impossible to reply for several minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Come, I said with decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill. I can't be responsible. Besides, there's Lucchese. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. He will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, true, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damp. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows and lay upon the mould. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and he nodded to me familiarly, with his bells jingling. I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us. And I to your long life, I replied. He again took my arm and we proceeded. These vaults are extensive, he said. The Montresors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. I forgot your arms. Oh, a huge human foot of gold in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto? Nemo me impune licessit. No one provokes me with impunity. Good, he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We passed through walls of piled bones, with casks, with puncheons intermittently into the innermost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again. This time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm, above the elbow. The nitre, I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it be too late. Your cough, it is nothing. Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc. I broke and reached him with a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I didn't understand. I looked at him with surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend, he said. No, I replied. Ah, then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. Yes, yes, I said, yes. You, the Mason? Impossible. The Mason, I replied. A sign, he said. It is this, I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my cloak. You jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath my cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our torches to glow rather than flame. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination, the feeble light, did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchese, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend, and he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed him immediately at his heels, and in an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were two iron staples, distant from each other by about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, and from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his waist, it was but a work of seconds to secure him. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "above the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more let me implore you to return. No? Then I will positively leave you then. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado?" said my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself removing these pile of bones. I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long, obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and then the third, and the fourth. And then I heard the furious vibrations of the chains as he tried to break loose. The noise lasted several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labours and sat down upon the burnt bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed with my trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon the level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the torch above the mason work, threw a few feeble rays of light within. The succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained man seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated, I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of his whom clamored. I re-echoed, and I aided. I surpassed them in volume and strength. I did this, and the clamor grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th and the 9th and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in, walling him inside. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over our wine," he said. The Amontillado. Yes, exactly, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be waiting for us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient and called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make up an end to my labours. I forced the last stone into position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected an old rampart of bones, and for half a century no mortal man has ever disturbed them. In pace requiescam.